Good morning. My name is Susan Reardon. I'm the staff hearing officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, October 12th to order. Today we have 5 items on our agenda, and I haven't received any requests for postponements or withdrawals, so we'll hear them in the order that they appear on the agenda. Under announcements and appeals, I don't have any new recent appeals, and there's no announcements I need to announce.
No, I would just say that the appeal for 246 San Clemente, which was a denial from the staff hearing officer, is being heard by the Planning Commission tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, I previously had announced that, but just if you're watching, just a reminder that the appeal for that project is at the Planning Commission tomorrow.
It's 246 San Clemente.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the staff hearing officer on items not on today's agenda? Seeing no one, we'll go to the first item, which is 501 Brinkerhoff Avenue, if the applicant would like to come up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Anytime you're ready, Danny.
Okay, Danny Cotto, senior planner. We're here to talk about 501 Brinkerhoff. It is a front setback modification request. I'd like to orient you to the site. It's at the corner of Brinkerhoff and Haley Street in downtown Santa Barbara. The blue line is the property boundaries. The yellow line is the setbacks. The black and gray area here, that's the existing residence, and this area in pink shows the existing area that encroaches into the Brinkerhoff setback. So the request is to do an interior remodel and change the roof form to match the house, and I'll show you that. So here is the existing floor plan, and I just wanted to show that in pink is the same thing over here. It's an existing bedroom, which is being remodeled on the inside to put in a full bath, and the entire inside of the house is being remodeled as well. And again, you can see that pink area that encroaches into the setback right there. Looking on the elevations, if you're standing on Brinkerhoff Avenue looking at the existing house, you would see this. And in pink again is the area that encroaches into the setback. It's a shed roof on top of the bedroom, and it's proposed to go to a gable roof here, and 4 windows going to 2 windows that more match the style of the whole house. If you look on the, this is if you're standing on the interior property line. Looking back at the house, again, you can see the shed roof area here, and the proposal is to make that into a gable roof there. So there's no new encroachment of floor area into the setback. It's really just increasing the height of the roof in the setback from the shed roof. That is about 8.5 feet high to about 13.5 feet high. Staff supports this proposal and recommends approval. We've listed a whole bunch of reasons in the staff report for approving it. Mostly, it's an appropriate improvement. It improves the aesthetics of this historic house. It meets the Secretary of Interior standards. It is not anticipated to have any effects or ill effects on the neighborhood or the openness of the streetscape. We are proposing, however, a condition about this eave. The eave, so the wall is 2.5 feet from the property line. The eave is proposed to go all the way out to the property line, and we're proposing that be cut back about a foot or so, subject to the review and approval of the Historic Landmarks Commission. So we're proposing to add that as a condition. We are proposing to remove a condition that we had in the staff report regarding the driveway and the removal of the curb cut in that driveway. We've done research and found that to be a non-conforming situation. So we'd ask to remove proposed condition 3 and replace it with a condition that would say, the eave of the proposed roof shall be set back approximately 1 foot from the Brinkerhoff Avenue front lot line, subject to the review and approval of the Historic Landmarks Commission. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Yeah, Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I represent the Bells who own this property. And Danny covered just about everything on it. I mean, basically, we've got this addition that was done sometime. The historians couldn't pin down the year exactly, but they think it was between 1913 and 1921. You know, the way they did the addition really isn't consistent with the architecture of the rest of the house. And my client, in addition to doing the interior remodel, he wanted to make the house aesthetically integrated on the outside. And so most of this, everything that's really within your purview has to do with this exterior changes here. And I just wanted to point out we're reducing the amount of windows that are encroaching within the setback significantly. This whole thing has a bank of these types of windows on all sides of it. And that's going to get changed to some windows that are much more in keeping with the character of the house, which will end up reducing the glazing overall that's within that setback. The setback in question is along a street. It's not next to another property, so nothing really happening there is going to impact a neighbor or in any way. And so, you know, there's no real adverse impacts that might result out of the modification that we're requesting. I'm glad we were able to figure out the parking. On this condition about reducing the eave, we could do that. There isn't, to my knowledge, any building code requirement or anything that would prohibit that eave from being on a property line. In particular, since this is a property line on which the other side of it can never have another structure, that would be a zero lot line structure. That would be the concern on any other kind of a property line. So I understand why staff's bringing that up. The only reservation I have about trimming back this eave is that the reason that we picked this dimension is to match the dimensions of the eaves on the rest of the house. Right. And the whole point of this project is to make this thing, you know, architecturally integrated all the way around it on all four elevations. I don't know what HLC is going to say about that, but just in general, aesthetically, I'd prefer it if we could keep it the way we have it and match the same dimensions of the eaves around the rest of the house. And then if there is an issue with building code for some reason, we can always address that when we're in building plan check. But I would prefer to handle it that way versus a condition on the project right now, especially a condition that says shall. If you guys said to look into it as your condition, I think I'd prefer that, and that would give us the flexibility and allow to keep the aesthetics consistent all the way around. I don't think that's a deal killer for the project either way, but that would be our preference.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any response to that, or?
Yeah. So it wasn't really a building code issue. It was more just a zoning issue of having that be right at the property line. We don't generally like eaves to be at property lines. We don't, you know, there was a trellis that went forward to on appeal to the planning commission, and it would kind of had the same issue, that the edge of the trellis was right at the property line, and that eventually got pulled back a little bit by the planning commission as well. So I was thinking more just kind of the zoning issue, not the building code issue. But the idea, but I'm sensitive to the aesthetics of the building and how it does match the existing. So the idea behind this condition was if the HLC thought it was more appropriate to keep it like this, then it could be kept that way. That's what the subject to review and approval is supposed to mean.
Okay.
We can reword it if we need to, but that was the idea. You know, we could say something like unless, instead of subject to review, you know, I could say something like unless the HLC directs a different eave dimension.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 501 Brinkerhoff Avenue? Seeing no one? Have we received any emails or calls?
No.
Oh, bless you. We'll close the public hearing. Actually, I do have one question for you, Jarrett. In regards to the project, you talked about it being a remodel, so this area is not going to be demolished and rebuilt. It'll be...
No, it's not. It's the same room. It's the same foundation. It's the same walls and everything. It's a new roof structure that would be consistent with the roof of the rest of the house and changing the windows and all. It's not demolition and rebuilding.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. I did go out to the site and visit the site, and actually, I do want to state for the record that this house was recently sold, and I went through the ZIR process, and I consulted a lot with the ZIR preparer because there's quite a lot of questions regarding what's non-conforming, what's conforming, and that. So I do have some history of the project just through that, my other duties at the city. So I just wanted to say that. In regards to the proposed changes, they are an appropriate improvement. Like Mr. Cato said, you're not increasing the building footprint you're just making exterior alterations to it. I too share the concern regarding having the roof eave to the property line for just zoning reasons versus building code reasons. So I am supportive of this condition, and we'll work to make it more clear that our desire, or my desire, is to have it cut back. However, if the HLC design board feels it's not appropriate, then they have the purview to be able to say that it's okay as is. And then in regards, you read the other two proposed conditions regarding abating the violations that were outlined in that ZIR and the trellis. So with the change to the conditions, the removal of the proposed condition 3 and the addition of the new one regarding the roof eave and the other two conditions in there, I can make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project. My action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period, and if either of those would occur, Danny would contact you.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Great. We'll go to the next item, which is 1124 Harbor Hills, if the applicant would like to come up. Morning. Good morning.
Yay.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Reardon. Again, Danny Cato, Senior Planner. The project before us now is 1124 Harbor Hills Lane up on the Mesa. The main scope of this project is to do a whole bunch of drainage improvements to the property. It's on quite a steep hillside. I'll orient you to the site. Harbor Hills Lane is it runs along the kind of the bottom here. Property lines are in yellow. The setbacks are kind of in this pink color, and it's a 30-foot front setback and 10-foot interior setback. The house I didn't outline. It's kind of in this gray shaded color, and all these black lines are various drainage lines that are being proposed, and going down to a kind of a large treatment area down at the street. Now, it's quite a steep hillside. I don't know if on the monitor you can see, but there's a whole bunch of contour lines. So the Harbor Hills Lane is quite a bit lower than the house. I would say that's on the order of 10 to 12 feet below the level of the house, depending on where you are in Harbor Hills Lane, because that kind of slopes down as we go down this way. The garage and the entrance to the property is off this driveway here. So you come in this driveway, park in the garage, and then for pedestrians, you walk to the front door, which is kind of in this area here. There. So the proposal that is before us today for the modification is not to have anything to do with all the drainage improvements. It's for an expansion of the front patio. And so the blue line here shows the extent of the edge of the existing patio. And if you go to at the site, this is existing, and there's a whole bunch of bushes in front that kind of cover it up. What's proposed is a retaining wall here, shown in the black and white striped line here, and then an extension of the patio, which is shown in this orange crosshatch. Now, as you can see, that's all within the front setback. But it is on the order of 10 feet, 12 feet higher than the edge of the street at this point. Also in green, we show the existing required open yard. It's almost double the size of the open yard, but it does meet the 20-foot dimension. This is in the backyard. This is also quite steep. The only flat areas on this lot are behind the house, are kind of this small area, and then kind of this small area to the side. The main recreational area is on this front patio, partially because that's where the view is too, coming out, looking at the ocean in this direction. Staff went around and around actually to figure out whether this actually needed a mod, but it does need a modification because it's it's changing the grade and having a new patio. But this is an appropriate recreational area for the site. It would not cause any impacts to the neighborhood or openness from the street, just because there's such a grade differential in between the street, which is a cul-de-sac, which ends right here. So it's a very low utilization street as well. So staff supports this modification and recommends approval, making the findings contained in the staff report. That concludes my presentation.
Okay. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Sure. My name is Eva Turenchuk. I'm the agent for the owner, Mr. Jerry Riggs. And Mr. Cato basically covered it. I did want to point out there is a hedge right now that will be removed, but we will be replacing it with another hedge. So in addition to the height differential, there will actually be a hedge in front of this patio as well. So I think at the end of the day when this is done, it's not going to be a discernible difference to the average walker by.
And what's the height of the retaining wall from the street, the lower portion?
It's less than 3 feet. It's really just retaining to allow the patio to come out because the grade drops a little bit.
Okay.
I think it's 2.5 feet.
Yeah,
I was trying to find the ticks that say top of wall and bottom wall. I couldn't clearly see it. When I look at the note down here, 15, it just says the retaining wall. It doesn't say the height.
We have a detail for it.
On this one, and up here, this one?
yeah,
No, this
it's
one,
this
A.
one right here.
So,
No, I thought, okay, so as I read this, it's about 5 feet tall.
Okay.
That would be showing, but again, there's going to be a whole bunch of bushes here.
Okay.
Right.
So it's 30 feet tall. It's 30 inches tall from the standing surface, but because
Okay.
of but another 30 inches below showing.
Below grade, yeah.
okay.
And then thank you, Eva. I was going to show the landscape plan. So this shows the new wall here, and then there's a whole line of bushes in front, and those are bushes that can grow to 8 or 9 feet tall if not trimmed. So that will, and then this shows the idea of what it would look like once it's all grown in place.
Okay. My other comment is that this wall here, I see on this plan it is noted 36 inches. On another one, I saw it was noted.
3'6", so 42
sorry,
inches.
yeah. Sorry. And the other one, it was 4'6" on another plan, CD. So just so you know, it is limited to 3.5 feet from existing grade.
Yeah. And that's the plan.
That's
So
the plan
if
for
it's
it.
incorrect somewhere, we'll fix that.
Okay, all right. I think those are my comments right now. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 1124 Harbor Hills Lane? I don't see no one. Have we received any letters?
No.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing. I did go out to the site and looked at the proposed improvements, and also looked at the neighborhood just to get an idea of what other improvements are within the front setback. Because when you're asking for a front setback modification, those are viewed with more scrutiny because they have a greater potential to affecting the surrounding neighborhood. And although it is on private property, it's part of the public viewscape, so when we're looking at issues. In terms of what you're requesting, it is an existing situation where the existing deck or the existing on-grade patio is within the setback, and that is allowed because it's on grade. And the extension of it, the minor extension, I think the staff report says it's proposed to be 2.5 feet extended, is not a significant change. And in terms of if it could go somewhere else on site, well, this is where the patio is, and it's just making it a little more usable. As Mr. Cato said, that there's really not any other areas outside for outside enjoyment, and it is a view lot, so that is, seems a reasonable request. So in regards to your request for the front setback modification, I can make the findings outlined in the staff report. Staff's not proposing any conditions, and I don't feel I need to add any additional conditions. There's adequate screening, and after my action, we'll go back to the design board, and they'll give it approval for the design of it. So I can make the findings and not add any conditions. My action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period. If that was to occur, Danny would contact you. Okay?
Great. Thank you so
thanks.
much.
The next item is 825 Roble Lane. The applicants would like to come up. And if there's any, I have received some public comment for this item, and if you want to address the staff hearing officer, if you could fill out a speaker slip and give it to Kathy. I don't know. Okay, great. Thank you. Oops. Anytime you're ready, Tony.
Good morning, Ms. Reardon. This is a single-family residential project at 825 Roble Lane. It involves a third-story addition, 645 square feet for a master bedroom or master suite to be added as a third story to the existing two-story house. The existing house is 1,778 square foot with a 379 square foot attached two-car garage. So this proposal adds a new third story to that with the master bedroom, bathroom, closet, and a deck at the third story level. Outdoor deck extending a existing chimney, and the deck would have a trellis over it. The project description talks about a lot merger, but that's been completed and recorded, so this is all one lot now. The document says this line was obliterated. Yeah. So now we have one lot that's shown by this pink outline. So the whole, this site is, I guess you could say, a candidate for a zoning modification given its configuration. It's very steeply sloped from, I guess, northeast to southwest, and the front lot line is quite a ways in from the street improvements. This is the edge of the street paving. So the front lot line where setbacks are taken is some distance back from the streets. It's surrounded almost entirely by front setback. This is interior lot line with an interior setback. So it's a constrained site given, the applicant provided a slope study. That's another plan sheet in here. We would consider this Roble Lane to be the primary street front and a secondary frontage. They provided a slope study splitting the lot in the middle and calculating this front half of the lot as being more than a 20% slope. So this line shows a reduced 25-foot setback that's provided for in the ordinance. So that's just a way of explaining. We end up with this shape here, this blue shape, is the area of the lot that's not zoning setbacks. The existing house footprint is here, so the third story would just follow the footprint where the existing house already encroaches into this front setback and the interior setback. I think that was basically it for my project description. Staff can support, well, we just described all the constraints of the lot, so it comes down to whether or not this proposal is an appropriate improvement or not. And staff has a recommendation in the report where we think this is a little bit too close to the front lot line in the street. Even though it is above the existing garage. We can go to some site photos that show how that looks. The applicant or the architect provided a very thorough set of plans, so there's all sorts of exhibits that you can refer to if you need various information. We've got sections and a street elevation, photo simulations. Photo simulations. Just trying to see which. So this is the existing house, this one, 2-story. And then this is the 3rd-story addition, and the deck would be right about there. And then this is below, this is APS, and then you can see Roble Lane, or Loma Media, and then Roble Lane goes up behind the house. So this is the existing house, and that shows the 3rd-story addition. And then we get closer from Loma Media. This is that little narrow part of the lot that was merged to the main part of the lot, existing and the proposed, showing the 3rd story. So everything conforms to the front setback from Loma Media. And this is going up Roble Lane as you approach the house. This is the driveway entrance to the property, showing existing and proposed. And it's on a steep lot. I mean, the house is kind of was built integral with a retaining wall. There's a section that shows that. So here's a section through the site and the house showing how the site was built with a retaining wall, kind of right in the middle of it, where there's a 2-story portion and then the garage is 1 story. So it would become 2 stories here and 3 here. And there's concerns from the neighbors, it seems, particularly about increasing the height on the lower side of Roble Lane, and the architect has a existing and
my
proposed.
purview actually is with the setback modifications, so the height is not an issue before me. It's more of what's requesting the encroachment into the setbacks.
Okay. And
So
we
if it's
looked-
within the height limits, that's not a zoning and meets solar.
Okay, so we looked at the height pretty carefully. This shows, I don't know how much it's our practice to look back at prior development grade, but if we did that, I don't have the line marked on here, but if we did look, because you know the height is taken from the lower of existing or proposed grade, but when we look at what might have been the pre-development grade, it looks to us like it still conforms barely. So it looks like the height is okay.
Okay.
So I think that does it for my presentation, unless you have questions.
Well, did you go into the justifications on why you're recommending reduced setback? You said that you were.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Just because of the site constraints, and we didn't see a real good opportunity for a conforming addition on the site. I did draw out the conforming part of the lot on one of these sheets. There's not much area to do an addition that's outside of the setbacks. It's basically this area to the west of the house on the ground. There's a little bit of space there to do an addition, but this is that major retaining wall that runs through the house. So there's not a good conforming option, and this looks like the most really usable part of their yard. They've got some yard area over here, but there's not a lot of usable outdoor yard area. So we thought a third story was appropriate. The single-family design board reviewed it, and they made positive comments and continued it to the staff hearing officer. They thought the third story was appropriate. The staff just has concerns about this being very close to the front lot line. I mean, we've got a table in our staff report where it's a required 30-foot front setback, and it would be proposed at 7. And the existing house has very large eaves, so the roof eave would get quite close. Over here, too, the roof eave would get to within a foot or two of the property line. So if this was pulled back, and we thought something like this wall between the bathroom and the master closet would be appropriate and something that we could support and recommend approval for. And we didn't talk to the owner or the applicant whether or not that's acceptable to them or not.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. One thing actually as part of the staff presentation, Mr. Cato, did you get a chance to read the letters that was sent regarding my ability to act on the modifications?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, Tony, if you would like to.
Let's see.
There was we received public comments regarding my ability to act on a site that is non-conforming, given the
Right.
provisions of our non-conforming ordinance. So I would like to.
Oh, that seems to be a little bit of a misunderstanding because these allowed alterations or improvements to non-conforming buildings are things that can be done without approval of a modification. It describes different types of improvements and conforming additions that you can do to non-conforming buildings without a modification. This project is approvable with a modification. Even new development, not even a non-conforming building, but theoretically a modification could be approved for a new building. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's conforming building or non-conforming or new. Mm-hmm. The ordinance does provide for modifications. And like I said earlier, modifications are generally provided for very constrained sites in special situations.
Okay, great. Did you want to?
Yeah, actually, if I could. Danny Cato, Senior Planner. So as I read the letter was contending that the staffing officer did not have the ability to approve a modification for non-conforming structures because of the way that the language is written in that portion of the ordinance, where there are limitations on what types of improvements can be done. And my response to that is that those provisions are written the same way for every other provision in the ordinance, right? Setbacks are written in the same way. You're not allowed to build any closer than X number of feet to a property line, period, right? That's kind of like a prohibition of building any closer than the setback allows. And yet the modification, the whole purpose of the modification is to give decision makers the ability to approve something that is beyond what the code allows because of special situations, right? That's why there's a public hearing. That's why there's notice to the neighbors that this is going to happen. I think of the modification as a sort of a mini variance, right? And a variance is the exact same thing. It allows decision makers to say, look, the code can't be written to take every single property and their configurations into account. Therefore, with a public hearing, we can move forward. And it's the same idea with the modification of the non-conforming standards. So you do have the ability to act.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I don't think I have any other questions for staff right now. So if you'd like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments.
Trish Allen with Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting.
I'm Kent Mixon with Androlitis Mixon Architects.
Mark Bell, I'm the property owner.
I'd like to start out by just providing sort of a brief introduction that Kent will follow up on and get into a little bit more about the architecture and the design and the intent of the project and what we're trying to achieve with this. Staff has done a pretty good overview, so I'm going to repeat a little bit of what they said. As Mr. Baumann mentioned, the lot merger has been recorded. That has always been Mr. Bell's intention to merge these lots. May I borrow the pointer? No, I want to use the pointer. It's longer. I mean, I know we all know what I'm talking about, but I think I should point to it on the table here. The portion of the lot where there's landscaping and terrace walls, down here where the curve occurs, Roble Lane down to Loma Media, is really not usable from a development standpoint. So it makes sense to merge these lots and have the lot area combined. Again, that was always Mr. Bell's intent, as he explained to me when he purchased the property. In fact, he thought he had merged it years ago. So that was a done process. As we recognize in the Riviera, we have a lot of zoning modifications in this part of our town because there are a lot of existing non-conforming buildings. And I think we have examples all up and down Roble Lane, Loma Media, APS, Arbolado, Media Road of modification requests due to these constrained lots. You have a steep hillside. You often have this condition that Roble 825 has with 2 front yards. So just as Mr. Cato explained, that's why we're here. We have the ability to ask for some flexibility in the code and meeting the development standards, these large setbacks, 30 feet on each side. So again, the purpose of the zoning modification process is to allow a degree of flexibility to deal with these constrained lots. I think that this lot shape is unique. You will see it in other areas of the Riviera where the roads are curving around properties. And we have to be creative and decide how can the property be improved and meet all the design guidelines that are in place too, and what are some reasonable encroachments to consider. Mr. Baumann went through the property constraints. We're going to go through that in a little bit more detail as it relates to the design development of the site. The staff recommendation is to not support our requested encroachments. We'd like to still propose what we've designed and what we worked very hard to get through the single-family design board. They were a little bit concerned about the development when they first saw this in March, I believe was the first hearing. And so we went away and we spent some time analyzing the site, developing more sections, doing the photo simulations to provide them with that visual context so that they could really evaluate whether or not this was an appropriate development so that they could look at neighborhood compatibility in mass, bulk, and scale. I realize that's not your purview, but it's such a key component to this project. If we couldn't succeed in gaining single-family design board support aesthetically for these things, I don't think we'd be in front of you today with these same modification requests. So it was a lot of time and energy that went into that. So the staff cannot support the degree of encroachment. The report explains that it's sort of goes beyond the tolerance of putting mass this close to the street. As Mr. Baumann points out, we have a large retaining wall here. The property line is very close to that retaining wall. However, help me out, the edge of the pavement is way up here. And I understand we don't get the benefit of saying this is a setback, but from a visual standpoint, that area is not developable, so it functions like a setback. So we're quite a distance away from the road itself. And like I said, Kent will get into more discussion in terms of design and why the mass was placed where it was. I think I've covered all my points. Like I said, Kent will get into detail, and then we'd like to conclude together with some additional justifications. I'm sorry, one thing I was going to say about the staff recommendation is that They're not supporting this degree of encroachment. They've looked at this demarcation between the master bathroom and the master closet, saying this line would be more supportable. From our point of view, it feels a little bit arbitrary in that it doesn't take into consideration the design and really, having an addition right over the existing building footprint. This project does not increase the building footprint. It's all the addition is within the existing building footprint, with the exception of this tiny little area and the green there that's for the stair reconfiguration. So we pop out a little bit there. It's really important to preserve the limited open space that this property has. And Kent has a lot more detail on the design.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay,
Trish.
we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
We need to.
I'll run through this. Then, so obviously the uniqueness of this lot is in shape and so forth is not necessarily unique to this neighborhood. And this is kind of a quick thing I printed out here this morning, and kind of stepping back and looking at the neighborhood. This is our property, Loma Media, Roble Lane coming up. The boxes are the existing surrounding houses. And you can see the property line, if it was projected up along this road, is the relationship to these houses is very similar, if not in some cases maybe even closer than what we're proposing. And I think in particular this house, it directly next door kind of illustrates kind of the whole or the purpose of the design that we have before you right now. This is the retaining wall that's on our property, and then it crosses the property line and dies into that house right there. From the street scope, this is a single-story house. Once you cross that line, across the retaining wall, this becomes a 2 to 2.5 story house at that point. And at its closest point is about 42 inches from the property line at that corner. Very similar to what we would be proposing. If this retaining wall died at the end of our house, it would be a very similar kind of arrangement. Once you cross that line, you're into a 2-story mass. But from the street scope, which we can look at in the street profiles, this is a single-story mass, and actually even less than really a single-story mass is viewed from the Roble Lane, because the entire first-story garage is under the road elevation. So, this project doesn't really translate itself very well to a two-dimensional problem. It doesn't translate well to plans and elevations because it's never really perceived that way. And we approach this thing as this three-dimensional issue because of the way the road's sloping. We've got slopes going the other direction for the site, where the mass sits and so forth is very, very unique. So we approach this as a very, as a 3D problem. And as such, we elevation here real quick to illustrate that. You can see here, this is the existing elevations, where the majority of the house, as viewed from the street elevation, is below that street elevation level. This is the area that we'd be building over, and that elevation there shows that mass that's closest to the street is this. This is actually set back at the front face of the house beyond. So the reason that we got to where we are is we did initially look at, the initial gut reaction is to build over the body of the house. That seemed like the natural thing to do, but as we studied that, we quickly realized we don't want to do that. How it's viewed from above, below, and beyond this site is not something we wanted to even present. So even though it was encroaching much less into a setback, we felt very strongly that this was a much more acceptable massing for the neighborhood and for what is seen from surrounding properties and in the city. It buries the mass into the deepest part of the site. There's roughly 11 feet distance from grade of that driveway to this street level. It buries it into where the densest foliage is. There's 2 big trees on these terraces that are going to continue to grow. There's several oak trees on the streetscape, along with ornamental trees along the street that are only going to continue to mature. And our intention is, as Trish said, it's built over the footprint with exception of that, and we plan to completely maintain all of that, the trees and the foliage and landscape. And also, by pushing this portion of the mass back here versus up here, we effectively reduced its mass, perceived mass from surrounding areas by roughly 50%. This buries it in the site. I think you can see in the photo simulations and so forth that it effectively does that. Aside from the exterior, what it helps us from the exterior side of things, it also helps us in terms of the internal function. The stairwell is where it could be. It's really restrained. There's not a lot of option to kind of relocate that somewhere else. And the whole program is to create a master bedroom suite that contains the bathroom, bedroom, and the master closet in a contiguous configuration. And to do it anywhere other than where we propose kind of gets bifurcated by the stairwell mass, which is not a great situation. So where we situated the mass helps in many standpoints. Yes, does this encroachment or this placement encroach
I need you to
more?
wrap up.
Okay. So yes, it does. But we feel like we've kept things in proportion with the existing house, the scale of the house. Single-family design review also recognized that, and as well, I think it was stated in the staff report that this would not be precedent-setting. It's very typical development for what exists in this neighborhood today.
Okay, great, thank you. I do have a question for you. It's regarding, have you done a structural analysis of the garage? Can it support your second story, or is it going to end up having to be demolished and rebuilt?
No, we will obviously have to do some foundation work, so we have done some initial kind of exploratory of what we would have to do structurally. But no, the intention is not to completely demolish the garage. We will have to upgrade some footings underneath areas, but we don't have to take it all down.
Okay, that's your intention, but so you haven't done a full structural analysis to see that all of a sudden in the field, oh shoot, we need to demolish it.
That's from what we know right now, based on the existing plans that we've looked at in archives and the initial review from the structural engineer. He does not feel we need to take it down.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. I'd like to note that I have received a couple letters that I've read. Two is from the same person, from Olivia Marr, attorney. That was from September, and then one from yesterday evening. Again, from Olivia Marr. That was the one I was alluding to. The part of the concern was I didn't have authority to act on these modifications, which I believe I do, and as the staff clarified. And then the other one is an email from Mr. Greenleaves, again, expressing concerns with the project, so I have read those. I do have two requests to speak. You'll be limited to 2 minutes, and Trish, if you wouldn't mind moving so they can sit there. The first one is Janine Palumbo, if you'd like to come up.
Hi, Tony.
Hi.
Oh, I wonder if I can get it right here.
Oh, I need a little bit. Oh, that's not very good. Okay. Anyway, I'm Jeannie Palumbo. How do you do? I'm Mark's neighbor.
Okay, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I met with you yesterday. I'm a longtime resident of Riviera. Just quickly, this is from inside the car where the roof line is.
You need to make sure you're on the mic, too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where the roof line is for that closet that they proposed. You can see it. This is sitting in my car this morning to see how close it is to the street, Susan. You're Susan, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, I just wanted to give some overviews of how close this is. It's very close to the street, and there's cars that park all up and down that street. It's a lane. It's not even a street. It's called a lane. we bought our home, it's a Delfonso, and so is Mark's, within a neighborhood of all Delfonsos. It's very attractive considering that, you know, Mr. Delfonso built the entire line, especially on the lower side of Delfonso's. The lots, street construction of homes were all built by him. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Just so I can get it on TV.
Oh, thank you. I thought the city of Santa Barbara was committed to preserving their heritage. I was up at like 2 o'clock this morning going, It was my impression when I bought my home that my neighbors would have to follow the same rules that I have to do. So going back to my point, there's a lot of room for adding in this home within the legal development limits. The lower floor is still unexpanded. There's a big family room area that has a full bath, and then there's a covered patio. And then they've got a nice green area. I don't think a planning modification should be granted until that entire area is looked at, Susan, because even Fred Sweeney and the other single-family review board members, and including, I mentioned this to Tony the other day, mentioned that to Mark and to Kent. I urge you to apply the zoning requirements already in place, deny this modification, and uphold the request of the design review board. If you watched the film, I'm certain you have, to the applicant to redesign their project within the developable areas still available on this site. I just don't understand, and I wish somebody could explain it to me why they need to build a third story when there's still area on that lower level that can be designed. And then if I could show you a couple more pictures. So that's how close it is to the street. It's very close. This is the parking normally at the site. It's either on the street, can you see that? On the street or at the end of the driveway.
I wonder if they can.
Can you see that any better? Okay, that's that. This is the wall down below that's still in question. It was, the property has an encroachment on that lower level where you see this area here. This wall was built out to go straight across. This was all built in the last year or two. Let me see. Come on, get back to where I was. And none of these pictures are doctored, by the way. They're all the original photos. So, you know, I didn't have anybody professional. It was me. I'm sorry. And I really appreciate all the time staff has put into working on this project, because I realize that a lot of time and energy goes into this. And my poor camera is locked up. But those are the most important things. Please protect the Delfonso. All right, thanks, Danny. Got it. But you can see that wall and that how close it is to the street. It's a lane. It's, I think, 16 feet wide. And when cars go up our street, what they do is they have to pull over, drive over. I've got two metal pieces that go over this culvert, because this is a culvert, and they go clunk, clunk, clunk. So I always know when cars are going up the street, because they have to stop and drive off the lane to pass the other one coming the opposite direction. It's really quite, you know, an intense area. I'm going to show you what the neighbors were. This is one house that had a third story that was removed after it was built years ago. Jim Block sent a letter to the Single Family Review Design Board expressing that and pointing that out. That was years ago. This is one house under construction, 919 Roble Lane. They're building within the footprint. This is a Delfonso. It's permitted. Here's the parking on our street. So 2 cars can't pass. It's just tight. Oh, that's my girlfriend. She just made it to Berlin to see her grandkids. Anyway, that's my story.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And again, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, I'd like to, the next one is Michael Palumbo, or Michelle? Michael.
Michelle, I'll save it here.
Michelle?
I was born over there. Hi.
morning.
Good morning. I'm Mike Palumbo. Okay, here's a picture of when the property was purchased in 2007 by Mr. Bell. Since then, there have been numerous trees added. Our neighbors, the Webbers, Mr. Greenleaf, etc. We have another neighbor. The Webbers have lost, they're right next door, they have lost their left view of the property, of the ocean, and that's a fact because of these trees. Anyway, I'm a longtime resident. Gina and I bought this property in 1980. Since the Bells have purchased this home, he has done a lot of things against city code. I think that's done, okay. Built a retaining wall on the public right-of-way at Loma Media, which definitely encroaches in Loma Media. I don't believe that was done with a permit. He's completely re-landscaped his yard 3 times without permits since the drought. He has planted numerous trees, fast-growing trees, in anticipation of perhaps this possible development. He's built an outdoor shower without permits that spills out onto Loma Media. He moved and then removed his mailbox the day the city came to inspect his property. I thought the city had a good neighbor policy when it came to developments. Mr. Bell, by the way, never came up to my house and say, hey, by the way, Michael, we're just thinking about doing this in the future. I would never think about doing that. So we had no knowledge of what was coming on. In addition to that, okay, if we allow a three-level house on the south side of Roble Lane, once you do that, it establishes a precedent for future development. That means all houses on the south side of Roble Lane then could have 3 stories in the future. The only houses that have 3 stories are on the north side of the street. The bottom floor is not for habitation. They are all garages. And I believe there's probably 7 or 8 of those homes. So there are no 3-level homes on Roble Lane that have habitation, people living in them, on 3 levels. Okay? So again, you're establishing a precedent by allowing that to happen. So that means in 20 years we could have a bunch of 3-level homes on the south side of the street. Okay? I welcome a visit by any of you to please come up to the Roble Lane, walk up the street, come to our house, come to Neil's house, and look at what we're going to be looking at. It's going to be the tallest fireplace on Roble Lane. It'll probably look like a rocket ship. The style will not conform with other properties. Once you do that, it will not conform. I still believe that they need to explore the bottom floor expansion. I don't know if they have. I've heard that perhaps they have, but there's a lot of square footage down there that could be possibly explored. And I appreciate your time. As I said, we've been there 36 years now, so we're kind of the old-timers on the block. And there's a lot of people that would like to be here, but of course people are working, etc.
Okay.
So that's what I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the staff hearing officer on this item? No? And we haven't received any additional ones other than the ones you've already given me, Kathy? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. I did go to the site and drove down the lane and observed the narrowness of the lane with the construction vehicles parked along it. And as Trish said, I have seen a lot of modifications in this area, given just the steepness of the slope and the odd lot sizes. So I am familiar with the neighborhood. In regards to the findings I need to make, they're both the same for the front and the interior setback. It says that the modification request is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. In regards to expanding and adding onto your house, that's generally seen as an appropriate improvement, so you can meet that trigger. The second part is it consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance? You know, why do you need to build in this area? Why can't you build in conforming areas? And in this instance, it was illustrated that this project, due to the slope, has a reduced setback. So the setback line here is 25 feet on this side and 30 on this side. And it's the bulk of the building additions proposed outside of that. You said that for design issues, I know Design Review Board has some kind of concerns. Zoning has another kind of concern. You need to merge those together. So in terms of zoning, just because this is where it's preferred to be, why can't it be in this area? What is prohibiting you from being in this area? I understand that the site is constrained. It has 3 front yards, pretty much. You know, it just has 1 interior. So any type of development, whether it's 1-story, 2-story, or the 3rd story, will need some kind of encroachment. And in terms of the building addition, it's all in this area, and there's a large outside deck. I haven't heard any clear reasoning why the building can't go in this area with the deck down in this area. So I agree with staff's reasoning in the fact that I don't see that it's been demonstrated to me why a more conforming addition can't be made. I don't know, Trish or Ken, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, and I spoke a little bit about that in my presentation, but when we had, well, that's where we started before we even presented that to single family, because we just felt like that was not the level. And actually, maybe we can even look at those elevations on 2-1. Again, this is the area that's closest to the street. This area is all set back, and this is, the deck, so it's very transparent. When we initially, the first review we went to single family with, we didn't have, this was a covered deck with the roof out here, so it was still transparent. We initially looked at it as that being the closet and bathroom area that was been bifurcated by the stairwell, because there's no real good location to do that. We had to even have a special couch built in that living room because of it's so tight in there to get around. So we felt, that mass being so visible and that roof line being out here was so much more in people's face and uphill neighbors and so forth. We didn't go there. I mean, it just did not feel right. And so we even, through the design review process, pulled this back, made this a trellis, stepped that mass even more, even on the Loma Media side, to help this thing kind of wedding cake as the design guidelines ask for. And as I think, findings that the single family board made too, what we were doing in situating that mass in that deep portion of the site was exactly what they wanted and pointed to in their design review guidelines.
And what do you mean by wedding cake? It's straight up.
Well, it's straight up here, but it's buried in this deep portion of the site. Here, it's stepping back on the sides, and this, as it looks at that elevation, steps with the slope, the development steps.
So you're
with
meaning
the
on
slope.
this side, but not in the front setback side.
Not necessarily right here, no, because it's just essentially buried into the deep part of the site. And as you can see on that elevation, this profile is still in keeping with the profiles of this section that's shown in the street section that goes all the way up the street, is consistent with the other houses in the neighborhood.
That are existing and not proposing. If they were to add on to their house, they'd have to get modifications too, and we'd be looking at these same issues. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're not creating anything that's beyond what is currently there with existing homes that are 60 plus years old. So our feeling was that, this allows for the mass of the proposed building to step with the slope of the streetscape and open up those public views and basically also what's seen from the cityscape. We took pictures from the city park, like single family asked, what do you see of this thing? And it just disappears back into the foliage that's surrounding this house on the west and the north side as well.
And then I get back to my point about there's the competing issues, the design versus the zoning. Yep. So I have findings I need to make.
Okay.
And my findings are that it's consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. And why does that need to be so far into the front setback? Just feet away from the front setback when there is other more conforming areas. I don't see a site constraint why it can't be in this area, or there is a cantilevered section over here, have a cantilevered over here. I just think there's other areas that an addition could happen that you don't need to request this significant amount of an encroachment.
And I don't mean to just keep reiterating the same point, and I think I heard Mark say it a moment ago. We understand that there are conforming opportunities, and we are proposing some addition in that area, but to put more mass and meet the setbacks, we really, and I'm speaking for Kent, felt that would be more visually obtrusive from Roble looking at the site, also from below, and actually have more of a concern from the neighborhood about the design of this third floor element. So that's why when, granted it is a significant encroachment, but it's not to say that zoning isn't important. There's a structure there already. It's a garage. We're adding a little bit above it, and it's sunk into the deepest part of that site. And we feel like when you're on that street, that it blends in with the other developments along that street. So it looks like it could have been there for a very long time, like some of the other homes have that mass very close to the street up above this property, and they were built a long time ago.
With different rules and different
With different
things.
rules,
We're in a
granted.
different, it's a different
Granted.
rules, different things. I disagree that it's just a little addition above the garage in the setback. It's the whole addition above the garage is in the setbacks. And so I can't get to making the findings. I even have concerns making the findings of what the staff's proposing in terms of even having the 15-foot encroachment from the front property line. My feeling is, like I said in the previous projects, when you're asking for a front setback modification, it has more implications than just your site. And I understand, it's the desire of the property owner that wants this type of addition, wants the nice store, the third story, capture the views and all that. But I have a zoning ordinance to uphold, and I believe that this is asking way too much, and it's really hard for me to make the finding. I don't know. In terms of my action, it would sound like what you would be recommending is for me to deny it and just to appeal it to the Planning Commission, or to approve it with conditions reducing the size, and you can still appeal it to the Planning Commission. I'm not going to be able to approve it as proposed.
Okay.
I don't know. What I can do is go to the next item. You guys can go out and confer, or you can just make a decision, and I can do it. I can just, continue it to after the next item. And then you guys talk, decide what you want to do, and we can reopen the public hearing.
To see what, do you want to confer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'll do? Table it.
Okay, sure.
Yep.
I will continue this item till after the next item, which is 1547 Shoreline Drive, and then you guys discuss, and we can reopen the public hearing at that time.
Two more.
There's two. Okay. Danny's fine. You don't have to stay. Thanks. Okay, so like I said, the next item is 1547 Shoreline Drive. Thank you for being patient.
Good morning.
Morning. Anytime you're ready.
Right. Good morning, Ms. Reardon. My name is Andrew Perez, planning technician. And the proposed project before you today is located at 1547 Shoreline Drive. This is a bluff top property in the appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone and zoned E3. Current development on this 22,800 square foot parcel, we have a 4,000 square foot, two-story single-family residence, excuse me, a 516 square foot attached two-car garage, a 564 square foot deck located off the rear of the property, as well as a bluff top deck and a 364 square foot accessory structure below. The proposed project consists of a 220 square foot expansion of this deck off the rear property, facade alterations to update the style of the existing dwelling, as well as a 92 square foot addition to the existing garage. The garage addition would happen by pulling out that front wall of the garage towards the front property line, thus triggering the need for a modification. And so the request before you today is a front setback modification to allow that garage expansion into the front setback. This project was reviewed by the Single Family Design Board on May 2nd of this year. And while the board was supportive of the project overall, they struggled with the 4-foot expansion into the front setback. But however, they did express support for a 2-foot expansion of the garage into the front setback. So currently the existing garage is about 19 feet deep. And most garages we see today have a standard depth of 20 feet. However, the applicants are requesting an additional 4 feet because the property owners drive oversized vehicles that they'd feel more comfortable in a 23-foot deep garage, and also give them some space to maneuver around the cars while they're parked in there with the garage door closed. The applicant did explore expanding the garage into the residence. However, the garage abuts a major structural wall, and that made that not a viable solution. So the property currently conforms to the 20-foot required front setback, and but it's actually located 30 feet from the edge of the public sidewalk, and that extra 10 feet was the result of the reduction of Shoreline Drive from 4 lanes down to 2 a number of years ago. And so while looking at the neighborhood, there are 7 other properties that do not conform to the front setback requirement along Shoreline Drive. However, all 7 are legally non-conforming, and actually one received a modification for improvements in the front setback, but it was unique in that case. They actually improved the situation by adding more unobstructed area in the front setback. So while giving consideration to the existing conditions, neighborhood compatibility, and potential impacts on the street frontage, staff is not supportive of a 4-foot encroachment in the front setback as requested, but can support a 1-foot encroachment to give the applicant that 20-foot depth of the garage that we see today. Staff feels that the properties in the neighborhood are legally non-conforming to the front setback, and that a 23-foot deep garage is not a necessary improvement on this lot. Therefore, in conclusion, staff recommends that a revised plan be approved to allow a 1-foot encroachment into the front setback, subject to the findings and condition in the staff report. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Great, thank you. I don't have any questions for you right now. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Yes, I would. My name is Tom Oxner, project architect. And I've got a few exhibits. Can I?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Around here. Okay, so this project currently consists of the wish to extend the garage out so that the garage can become a usable garage. Currently, it's actually 18 feet, 9 inches drywall to drywall on the depth of the garage. The 20-foot minimum that is standard within the city really doesn't work for vehicles. I've designed a lot of garages, and 22 is really the minimum that you need. We're asking for a 4-foot extension, which would give us a 23-foot interior space. I've got 4 lines drawn here. The first line out from the building is the 1 foot that the staff report supports. The second one is the one that the SFDB supports. The third and the fourth one here would be, the third one would be just viable in terms of the cost relative to the effort it takes to pull a structural wall out. And the fourth line there represents what our application is actually asking for. In all these cases, we have found 7 instances just in the immediate neighborhood, and here they are. And these cases all represent either garage or structures that are within the 20-foot setback. And their net result, as you can see, are illustrated here on these plans. The one case that was pointed out in the staff report is 1521. And this is the one that's used to sort of establish the precedence by saying that, yes, there was a modification allowed for a carport there. It doesn't look to me like a carport, and it sure looks like the net result on that is something that encroaches much more closely into the required 20-foot setback. So not only is there a mod that substantiates the request here, but there's several other situations that are much closer than what we're proposing. So let's look at what we're proposing again. We've got a unique situation here in that we've got an excessive amount of area between the garage and the right-of-way. It's 31 feet, over 31 feet right now. And even if you were to approve any one of these lines here, the 1, 2, the 3, or the 4, you would out 4 feet, you'd still have a net result of 27 feet from the face of that garage to the right-of-way. The perception of 27 feet is very similar to 26 feet, which is very similar to 24 feet. From a level ground, the perception looks something like this. You can see that I've tried to draw those lines back in there along the face right in front of that existing garage. So the staff report says that it can support 1 foot, but I'm submitting that whether if it's 1 or 2 feet, it doesn't work. If it's 3 feet, it works, and the perception is really the same. I can't imagine that a 2 or 3 foot change across a 27-foot depth when you're at eye level is going to make a big difference. The only thing that will make a big difference is not getting that, because then this house is on the verge of being improved significantly, and we'll have a garage that just doesn't work. And it will have an 18-foot, 9-inch depth garage indefinitely, which is likely not to be used because it doesn't make sense to pull that structural wall out just 1 foot in order to achieve a little bit of room that still isn't going to work for the garage. Now, in terms of the SFDB, I went to that meeting, and I presented the project before the board. And the first thing that was said to the board came from staff, and it was, you're going to look at a project here, and staff does not support the modification. So right out of the box, if SFDB is supposed to be used as an unbiased gauge as to how this request is supposed to be perceived by the community, they need to be, hear really what they think of it rather than being asked to go against what staff thinks about it. So even having said that, they did support the 2-foot extension, and several people on the board were in support. I just watched the video before coming over here. I think that there would be support in this case, given the extensive area in front. It was discussed. I think if you were to approve this, I don't think a precedence would be set, because there's just no properties around that have this much depth and screening in front of this garage, and you're going to end up with a garage that will ultimately be used. So I think, so if we go back on this site plan here, I think, the only real difference in perception from any one of those 4 lines is that 2 of those lines will actually provide a workable, usable garage, and the other 2 will keep the facade exactly the way that it is. That's the only, and in all of those instances, what the public perceives of that facade from that distance across the right-of-way to the garage will be negligible. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Okay, great, thank you. I would just like to comment on one thing regarding the staff comments at the Design Review Board. It's quite often the staff goes to the Design Review Boards in regards to modifications, and the board asks them what their opinion is, or is staff going to support it or not, and they give their opinion whether they're going to support it. And there's been projects before, the staff hearing officer before, where the design board was supportive of the request or the project, and staff wasn't. So I don't know how much the staff's comments influenced them or not, because I have seen instances where staff and the design board has not been in agreement. So I just wanted to comment on that part. So I don't have any other questions for you right now, but I would like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 1547 Shoreline Drive? anyone. Have we received any letters or phone calls?
No, we have not.
No?
I've got one more question, I'm sorry.
Sure, well,
that
I
came
got
up
to
in-
finish the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
So then I'll close the public hearing. Yeah, if you had another question, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going through the staff report. So I did notice that the staff report specifically says that staff does feel that the 23-foot deep garage is a necessary improvement on the lot. So that's clear to me in the staff report. And I do understand that the report refers to a case that isn't really what was out there. So I'm just wondering, is that the intent of the staff report to support a 23-foot garage? Or is that not?
Where are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm right here. Right there.
I think there's a missing word.
Yeah, that is a typo. Yeah, it should say not supportive.
Does not feel.
Yeah, if you look in the first sentence of that paragraph, staff is not supportive of the 4-foot encroachment.
But
can't support
it
a
sounds
1
like,
foot.
staff does understand the need for a 23-foot deep garage, right?
No, I can confirm that that was a mistake and should say staff does not feel that a 23-foot deep garage is a necessary improvement, as I stated in my presentation.
Okay.
So apologies for that.
So, since today has been this, the subject has been front setback modifications, and as I said in the other ones, the front yard is, I know it's on private property, but it's part of the community setting, the neighborhood setting, and in this instance, this is Shoreline Drive, and it's a scenic public highway. It's, a major thoroughfare, and so setbacks and building orientations is very important. And I take the design board's comments and their minutes. There might have been some individual board members that supported it, but the majority in what was passed was that they couldn't support the 4-foot encroachment, that they could do a 2-foot. And so that is a little more than staff is recommending. In general, when people ask for modifications to garages that are in the setback, we allow it to be the minimum required to meet the minimum standards. So that's how staff got to their position of the 20 by 20 dimensions. In your case, I can understand the desire for a larger or a longer garage to fit the larger vehicles. I couldn't go any farther than what the design board could support with the 2-foot encroachment, which is, I think, more important in this situation in that it is such a highly visible, important street in the city. So I could approve the project with the 2-foot encroachment, but it sounds like that's not what you want. So do you want me just to go ahead and deny the project outright or deny it?
I just heard that it would still be appealable.
It is.
It is still
Yes.
appealable.
Yeah, so I could approve the project with the condition that the garage encroach no more than 2 feet into the front setback. And yes, that's still, any of my actions is appealable to the Planning Commission. So you would walk away with an approval, then you can discuss it with the property owner and see what they want to do, and then you can take that up to the Planning Commission and request your 4-foot.
Okay, great.
That is an option.
Yeah, I think that's a good option.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll make the staff in their staff report had 2 findings, one for denial and one for approval with the 1-foot encroachment, so that would give me options to decide what to do. What I will do is I'll change it to the approval findings for a 2-foot encroachment and change all the words to 2-foot. And change it correspondingly, that the 2 feet, and then it would be a 21-foot dimension, and then reference the design board's comments too.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you read the condition. It's a standard archaeological condition about alerting the contractors of the remote possibility of encountering subsurface remains.
We've already got
Okay. All right.
We've done
So
all that.
with that amended condition, I approve the project allowing for a 2-foot encroachment, subject to the conditions in the staff report. And yeah, my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. And they also have oversight authority of all my actions. And if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period. And if either of those would occur, Andrew would contact you.
Okay, and could you please state to me the finding that you couldn't make?
The denial,
Yes.
it's in the written staff report.
Oh, it
so-
is. It's the one I've got highlighted here. It's the one that says, the applicant to expand the depth of the garage, the minimum dimension of 20 feet, and is not anticipated to adversely impact the visual openness of the streetscape.
Yeah, and then I'm going to add reference to what the SFDB said regarding the 2-foot. Because at this point, they were recommending a 1-foot, so I think
Only because they were instructed that staff wouldn't support it. That was my impression, honestly, at the meeting. And I think that if nothing comes of this, I think there should be some better instruction to the SFDB when they're reviewing modifications that going against what staff is saying is okay.
I think they understand that, but I could transmit that to the supervisor of that section, just to make sure that their comments don't taint their discussion. I understand your concern.
I appreciate that.
Like I said, I know of situations where staff and the design board have conflicted, and it's gone before me. It's something that occurs.
Okay.
I've seen it quite a bit.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if the next item's ready to come back in. Kelly, do you want to see if they're ready? If not, I'll move on to the... Huh?
Oh, that I don't.
Yeah, I continued it to after this one because to give them time to discuss the option. But if they're not quite ready, I can move on to the last item. She's seeing if they're ready or not. You ready? Yeah. Okay, so yes, we will go back to item 2C, which is 925 Roble Lane.
I'm not sure if you wanted to see something in all the items. Or
Well, I mentioned that it would be just after this one. I could have moved it to the end.
I wasn't sure if we were coming at the end or in between.
Okay, so before I continued this to after that next item, you guys were going to go out and discuss the different options, and I don't know, you can say what you decided, what.
Well,
one.
Thank you. We'd like to hear your analysis for the staff recommendation for approval, which we're debating. I don't think we got enough information or feedback from you on the recommended approval for the reduced encroachments that's in the staff report, and if we can get there with that project.
Oh, with the 15-foot?
Mm-hmm.
My
We all heard something a little different.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, my concern, yes, I can't get to the approval with what's proposed.
I understand that much.
And then struggling with even the 15-foot request, or the 15-foot encroachment that staff's recommending, just given the amount of area that I believe can be added that was within the setback, that conforms to the setback requirement, or even having a minor request for this area, since this reduced setback was approved. There's additional area here, and then even going out, expanding the second story in this area. And so that's what I was asking of you guys. I wasn't clear what are the physical constraints that prevent you from doing that. It sounds like it's more of just a design and a desire of how you want it to be laid out.
Well, and honestly, I think that we're concerned that we be able to gain the support from the single family design board by shifting things in a way that away from what their guidelines, establish.
But you don't have my support.
I know.
So, I mean, you
We're
have both
kinda
support.
stuck
So
with-
you're, So it's
We're stuck.
That's the thing. That's part of designing the project is to take all the different interests in coming up with a project. I also don't feel comfortable designing a project in the public hearing setting
Right.
because it's kind of on the fly, and so I get concerned saying, okay, we'll just cut it back 15 feet. Well, what is the full ramifications of that? So that's another consideration too.
So I thought we were ready, but now I have a clear understanding of, where your analysis is in terms of the staff recommendation. It sounds like you'd be pulling it back more than what the staff recommendation is for approval and asking us to explore a design that would be conforming to the setbacks and add more
Not
mass.
necessarily totally conforming to the setbacks. I realize that this
More conforming.
yes,
Yeah.
that this site is severely constrained, but the amount of encroachment that's requested is just way too great. Another option would be is that I would continue it for 2 weeks, and it would stay at this level, but then I couldn't guarantee a positive outcome anyways, so I don't know.
What would a 2-week continuance help?
Well, we would that way we wouldn't be designing
On the fly
during the
right
public hearing. We would analyze a different addition with a different encroachment and bring that back.
And it might be that you go away and you design something per staff's recommendation, and you say this isn't just going to work. Take an action on the project. We're going to the Planning Commission. That it could be that too. It just prolongs the decision. It's more plans, more time for you. But I could do that with direction to restudy other options that are more conforming to the zoning ordinance and acknowledging that there's going to be some kind of encroachment necessary. And then you can keep working at this level. And if it's just not going to work, you still have the option to appeal. So
we would have to have you take action in order. So we'd come back here for that action and then appeal that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continuance isn't appealable, but
Right.
an actual action is. So if you would like to take that route, I'm fine with doing that, doing a 2-week continuance.
I think so.
I think with some feedback from you, that would be great. Additional, the continuance.
Yeah. Okay. So what additional feedback did you want? I thought I just gave you some.
I thought you were going to elaborate some more. I mean, Kent and Mark are fine with what you've
I think
explained.
you've heard my concerns, what they are, and I know you're a good architect. You can take them into consideration, and I won't have any hard feelings if you come back and say that just doesn't work for us. It's your right, to go through the process. I just can't get there with this project, and I do have concerns with what staff's recommending. So,
Okay.
Mr. Eden, is there an option for an indefinite continuance so that there could be a check-in with the single-family design board?
if they want to
I don't even know if
do
you
that,
guys
the
would
thing
want
we
to
need
do
to renotice. But I could do like a month. We can pick a particular date, or I can do an indefinite continuance, and then we just need to renotice it when it comes back on. I was just picking the 2 weeks so we didn't have to renotice it and streamline it.
Yeah, that's a hard one because depending on where we massage this thing, I could see them definitely having strong opinions.
Okay. Well, do you want me to do it
Beyond.
indefinite? We can renotice it. It's fine if you feel more comfortable with that.
I think maybe we should do that. What's your opinion?
Yeah, 2 weeks is not much time to even come up with an alternative.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep you guys
Especially
moving
to
along.
submit. And,
Well, in 2 weeks you wouldn't be able to go to design board.
Yeah.
It'd be more of you guys.
yeah.
Coming back to you.
Yeah. And so I can do an indefinite continuance, if that's what you prefer.
I think that's what we should do.
I'm sorry, it's just the agendas are impacted. It's hard to get back on your
that's
calendar,
it.
and that's my concern for the
Well,
bells.
this is October. We can do.
I'd
We
rather
only have
pick a
one
specific date.
Okay, we only have one meeting in November, and then we have November 9th or the first meeting in December.
I think we
Maybe we
should
should
come
do
back on the 9th.
November 9th, yeah.
Okay.
Do you agree, Mark? Okay. Let's
Okay.
do a continuance to the 9th, and perhaps we'll have some time to
Okay.
check in with design review.
Okay, yeah.
And would that need to be renoticed if we're getting a specific
No, if
date?
you get a
Okay.
specific date. Now, if we continue it to November 9th, it won't be renoticed because people who are following it will hear it today, and it'll be on the minutes and everything.
Okay.
Okay.
And as that time approaches, you can request a continuance in writing for another one, and that would be on that agenda, the 9th, that the applicant has
Gotcha.
requested a continuance to blah date, so that
Okay.
people who are following it, they can
track it.
see in the minutes what happened.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so with that, I'll continue this item to November 9th for additional study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. So now we'll go to the last item, which is 1542 Santa Rosa Avenue.
Thanks.
Oh. Anytime you're ready, Kathy. Or Kelly. Yep.
Okay, good afternoon or good morning. Kelly Broadison, Community Development. The project I'm presenting today is the request for a lot split at a project site 1542 Santa Rosa Road. The lot is 22,062 square feet with 2 separate legal homes. It's in the E3 zone, a one-family zone, and general plan and local coastal plan designation of residential 5 dwelling units per acre. It's also in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. If the lot split were approved today, the new parcel 1 in the front would be 10,904 square feet with 8.1% slope, and parcel 2 in the rear would be 11,158 square feet with an 8.5% slope. The applications that are being requested today are a tentative subdivision map for a one-lot subdivision, a street frontage modification to provide less than the required street frontage in the E3 zone, and a coastal development permit. So for the tentative subdivision map, the minimum lot size in the E3 zone is 7,500 square feet, and each lot that would result as a part of this subdivision would exceed that, as I had stated before, the lot sizes. The street frontage modification, all lots in the E3 zone require at least 60 feet of frontage. The existing lot has 95 linear feet of frontage on a public street, and the new parcel 2 in the back would have 0 street frontage, with the exception of a 14-foot wide easement that would cross over the front lot. Staff is supportive of this modification due to the 14-foot wide easement, which would provide access to the rear lot, and it's a continuation of the existing situation, and it's also compatible with the character and physical layout of the surrounding neighborhood. The project is also found, per our analysis, to be compatible with the land use element of the general plan and is consistent with the local coastal plan. So staff recommends that the staff hearing officer approve the street lot frontage modification, the tentative map, and the coastal development permit, making the findings in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A. One of the conditions of approval is that the front parcel would have to remove the driving surface in order to comply with the 1,250 square feet of open yard for single-family residential zones.
The back parcel.
So that's this area in here?
Yeah, this one, sorry. And Jarrett Gordon is here as the agent for the owner to make a presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. She already stated your name, so.
Hi, Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I represent Jane Griffin, who owns this property. And Kelly covered all the statistics of this project, just a little bit of history on this. This is all one big lot, which is significantly larger and deeper than most of the existing lots up in that neighborhood. And in the late 90s, the city approved this house to be built along with, the municipal code section that they did this under doesn't exist anymore. It's been changed, but it's sort of a performance standard permit, I think it was. And so they allowed 2 legal residences to be built on this large lot. And so we have an existing legal situation with 2 residences on one lot in a single family zone right now that has like some conditions that go along with it, and actually, ongoing enforcement of conditions like that they have to remain consistent with, because it was all part of a conditional approval for this. So the owner wants to divide this lot into 2 lots, which are essentially conforming lots. When we designed the subdivision, we picked a new lot line that would result in 2 lots that would meet the sizes, meet all the setbacks based on where existing structures were, so that everything would still comply. And each lot still does comply with all requirements, with the exception that this one doesn't meet the frontage requirement, obviously, because it's a rear lot. I talked about this in the applicant letter for the modification, but there's no way to physically divide this lot in a way that would provide the frontage. And even anything that actually would provide public street frontage here would just be a very awkward lot situation. We still wouldn't meet frontage on either lot. They'd meet the area requirements and all, but they wouldn't really be buildable lots. You'd have to demolish and reconstruct 2 houses, and that's a hardship. That's just an unreasonable hardship. You can see in this aerial photo that this is the existing development, but even if you divide this with a lot line, it's very similar to the pattern of development and lot sizes and dimensions that are throughout this neighborhood. So we feel that this configuration is very consistent, with the exception of that frontage, and then the frontage access issue is addressed by this easement here, which we'll dedicate as part of our map. And the easement's wide enough to provide a driveway and for all utilities and everything that would continue to serve this residence back here. In terms of this driveway, this would be removed, and we're proposing to replace that with just wood chips. We don't want to put in a whole lot of new landscaping right now because of the drought.
So you're proposing to remove all of it?
Yeah, up to this point. So the point that's shaded in here with this hatch pattern would all be removed, and then we'd leave this portion because that's part of the access. But then this would allow us to meet our open yard area, which we have designated on this map.
Okay, because I was just looking real quick about your previous conditions on that.
There's nothing on
Because, I pulled out the previous plan for the when the house was proposed, and this doesn't come out good for the TV, but here's the proposed residence, and here is the existing residence. This garage, there's a garage and a carport or something that was demolished and rebuilt for it, and it shows the driveway coming down with no paving in this area. So I was going to recommend a change to the condition regarding just the 1,250 square foot area be removed, that all of it, that it needs to be returned to this configuration. But I do know, given this, I did a site visit, and there's been a number of subdivisions in the Mesa area. Some do 2, some do 3. They have enough lot area, and parking is a big issue in this area. Pretty certain there's only parking on one side, and even when there is parking on one side, it's very narrow. So I understand the desire to have additional parking. So, if you wanted to do a couple of spaces here outside of the setback, you need to remove the part of the driveway, so there's no parking in the setback. But that's okay. But it would need review by design board, whether that would be consent or admin or what, but that kind of thing. But that was just the comment that I had.
Okay, we'll look into that. As it is right now, we were actually proposing to remove far more than just what's necessary to meet this minimum requirement. But you bring up a good point. I noticed that when I was up there at the property as well. There's very limited street parking.
Yeah, and then if people are parking all down the driveway, then it causes. So I understand the desire to want to have guest parking. It just needs to conform to the code. And
Okay.
Then, again, design board, which since it's on-grade paving, I would think it's not the full board. It'd either be consent
Right.
or if staff has the authority to administratively sign it off.
Yeah, we'll look into that and revise it appropriately.
Okay. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify about your point. So the
Well, that concludes my presentation. There's nothing else really to add.
okay, great, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. I haven't received any letters regarding it. Have no letters? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Like I said, I did go out to the site, and then I have reviewed 2 or 3 other subdivisions in this area, and your proposal is consistent with the hodgepodge of parcels in that area, either 2 or 3 houses in a row. And like I said, when I was questioning you with the guest parking, that's always an issue. And I realize this is in the setback, so that shouldn't be used for parking, but you need it to back
Right.
out too, because you can't, it's too long to back out that way. So, providing the guest parkings is an appropriate thing to do. In regards to the consistency with the zoning ordinance, yeah, the lot sizes is the same. We had some question regarding whether this is 5 or 6 feet, and it appears that it actually is 6 feet.
6 feet, yeah.
10 scale. So, yeah, it just depends on where the line is in there.
Yeah, it's hard to read right here because the line is actually right through the middle of this
That wall, yeah.
So it's this single black line. And just to make it a little easier to see this, this is all off of a site survey by Dennis Dodson, a licensed surveyor.
Right.
And it's all CAD accurate. And this setback line here, this dotted line, that's the 6-foot setback that we superimpose. So this is all internally referenced in CAD. And you can see that the house lines up on that 6-foot line.
So, in terms of setbacks, open yard area, it meets all the zoning requirements. It meets the general plan density requirements. It meets the Coastal Act. There's no significant coastal issues in this area, so it is a supportable request regarding it. And then in regards to the conditions, you've read all the conditions and understand them and agree with them. Yeah, so the condition that I would change is on page 3. It's under community development review prior to parcel map approval. And what staff was proposing is to say the asphalt driveway on parcel 2 will be removed and replaced with blah, blah, blah. So I just wanted to be more specific of which area we're talking about, because as you interjected, it's not the driveway access. So that it's about 23 feet by 70 feet asphalt between the residence on parcel 2 and the newly created parcel line shall be removed and replaced to comply with the plans approved by the ABR on March 11th, 96, and to provide the 1,250 square foot open yard area. And then I just put I wanted to make it clear that that it needs to be brought back to that condition, but if you want to do changes, so then if changes to the open landscaped area are proposed, the changes shall be reviewed and approved by, I'm going to put the appropriate review board, because if it's before the parcel recordation, it'd be ABR. If it's after, it'd be SFDB. So whichever one, depending on which, and since this says prior to recordation, it should be the ABR.
Okay.
But again, I wanted to be clear that it needs to start with being put back to what was approved, and then if you want to make changes for guest parking or what have you, that needs to be reviewed, if that makes sense.
Just to be clear, though, we could actually go in and propose that revision and get that approved. We don't want to put this back to a condition and then reconstruct.
No, right, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So at a minimum, it needs to be put back. So, and then if you want to make changes, so instead of putting it back, you want to do the changes.
Then we have to go and process that additional. I get it. Okay.
I guess I can make sure it's clear, because I don't want you to go and remove everything and then say, hey, now we want to do it. That would be kind of silly. You just keep a portion of it and stuff. So, all right, so with that change to that condition, I can make the findings outlined in the staff report regarding the street frontage modification, the tentative map, and the coastal development permit, and approve your project subject to the conditions as I revised them. My action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period, and if either of those were to occur, Kelly would contact you.
All right.
Okay?
Thank
Thanks. I adjourn the meeting.